I think we've all done things that make us feel foolish. I know that I have. We have 3 kids, and our oldest son, he was one of those. He was one of those types that he was very curious, and because of his curiosity, we taught our kids that there was no stupid question. And he would ask a question, and then he would ask a question, and he would keep asking questions. What I found to be true about him is that he really wanted to find out for himself. You could tell him not to do something, and unless it was just going to kill him, I'd usually let him figure it out on his own. We used to travel around in this van. It was a kind of a makeshift camper. We had an air conditioning unit in the back window. I actually had a lady at a rest stop ask me how I kept the van cool. And I just looked at her and shook my head and said, I have a really long extension cord. And she looked at me like you are. Well, we told him, don't touch those aluminum grills there on the air conditioner because, they're sharp. What do you think he did? He touched the aluminum grills on the air conditioner and he cut his hand, right? Well, where did he learn that from? I don't know if he didn't learn some of that, maybe from me. We had a swing set in the backyard when we lived in Dallas, and as was the case with most kids, they pushed those things to the limit, right? And so he was on the teeter-totter, and he was pressing that thing, and it was going higher and higher and higher, and he had to lean over. He was going so high, and we made comment, you can't get much higher than that. And there was a screw, a bolt head, that was sticking out, and he caught it just perfect. So there's a trip to the ER, right? So there he is. He's in the ER, and we're getting him stitched up, and we get him home, and we get busy about doing some things. And I look out there in the backyard, and what do you think he's doing again? He's on the same teeter-totter, and I'm thinking to myself, buddy, it's a fool's errand. You're going to do the same thing again. So Dad went out with a hammer and broke that thing off and then filed it. You got a lot to look forward to. Waylon will have his time. A lot of things we do in life are foolish. And hopefully we learn by experience and we learn by others not to do those things, not to repeat. So I read to you from 1 Corinthians chapter 1 that God chooses the foolish things of this world to confound the mighty. And the wisdom of this world as compared to God is null and effect. And so it really got me thinking, how am I going to follow up with sin is not my boss and that there is no reason for sin to have dominion over us? How am I going to follow that up this next week? I think it goes back to the idea of what is wise and what is foolish. And how do we walk wisely? I'm going to give you the outline because I'll probably get going here in a second and I'll forget it. Here it is from the book of Ephesians, and I'm going to read a section, and I'm going to ask my brother at times to throw up some verses out of the book of Proverbs. We've got a lot to cover, and that will help expedite our time a little bit. What is a fool? What is a fool? What is considered wise? Now that you know the Lord, you are considered children of light, not children of darkness. And so it raises a question, a conundrum. How do you distinguish between wisdom and foolishness? Let me give you 3 ways. Number 1, you prioritize. I'm telling you right now, if you don't prioritize, somebody will for you. And it's often not the way that you should go. Number 2, there is a certain brevity to life. There's no guarantee as to how long you get to experiment with this thing called life. It goes by very quickly. Now, to a teenager, a lot to do, a lot to think about. Did you realize that between the ages of 18 and 22, some of the most important decisions that anybody could make will be made during those years. But I contend that it happens way before then. There are things that you prioritize in your life, in your kids' lives. If you don't, somebody else will. And here's the thing I think that amazes me now that we have grandkids. And I'm waiting for the day when one of them gives me a notice that they're getting ready to get married, and I'm going to have a string of weddings to do, just probably one right after the other. And so there is a brevity of life. You don't see it that way when you're 12 or 20, but when you start reaching a certain age, you then realize just how fast this thing went by. And every day seems to go by just a little bit quicker. And then number 3, above all, there is a sovereign God. There's a sovereignty that I trust in. I don't understand it all the time. There are many times when I scratch my head in disbelief, and it's mostly about what I thought or did or said, not what he thought and does or says. And so those are the 3 things that make one wise. You say, prove that to me. Okay. Ephesians chapter 5. Now I'm making an assumption, and don't let me do that. If you don't know the Lord, this is still for you, but not necessarily yet. In other words, you still need to trust in Jesus. You need to put your faith in him. You need to call on the name of the Lord. You need to remember that word reckon that we used last week. You reckon? You believe so. You affirm that. You affirm what you hear, that Jesus died on a cross for your sin. You know that your sins were buried with him. You don't fully understand it, but you believe it. And then by faith, you acknowledge that by an act of the will, and you say yes to Jesus, and so then sin has no dominion over you. I had to get that in again. That's just too good to pass up. There are people that have walked for years with the Lord, and they still haven't embraced that idea. So since you are a child of the light, since you no longer walk in darkness, since there are some needs for you in order to be wise, you have to go to the source of wisdom. You know, I found that my father, the older I got, the wiser he got. Have you ever heard that? We heard something the other day that my dad used to say all the time, and I didn't realize it was from Shakespeare. Now, my dad's an old Navy man, right? The last words coming out of his mouth are going to be from Shakespeare. But he used to say that all that glitters is not gold. Did you know that Shakespeare said that? So as I got older, my dad got wiser. And then one of the things that he would admit to me way later on in life is that he needed to be knocked down a notch or two. And I'm going to tell you something. There was nobody that I knew on the face of this earth that could knock my dad down a notch or two. So somebody that was not of this earth had to knock him down a notch or two. Do you know people like that? People that flirt with foolishness. They seem to always be knocking on the wrong door. They seem to always be wanting to run their hand across that grate. It's not foolish to make a mistake. It's foolish to continue to make that same mistake. And so here's what Paul told and I think it's important for us. He told those that were walking in light, he told them this: let no man deceive you with vain words. I hear a lot of things. I did something this last week. Laura gets real nervous when I start this. I did something last week. Since the internet is all-knowing, I asked AI a question. Now, when you leave here, you're probably going to do the same thing. Now, I used some parameters, but I asked this question. How do you build a mega church? I wanted to know. How do you build a mega church? And then I put in some parameters. This is what I got back. First of all and foremost, you need to have an environment that is friendly, almost Hollywood-esque, Lights, camera, and action. Now, here's the thing about that. We've got one of the best technicians in North Texas sitting right back over there. There's not anything that I could ask him that he can't figure out how to do. And I'm all for lights and camera and action. We video this every week. There's not anything immoral about lights, camera, and action. But what got my attention was the idea that I thought that in order for me to build a mega church, I had to pursue that to the point that I preach a counterfeit gospel. That's a quote. A counterfeit gospel. Don't make people feel uncomfortable. And then I wrote this list of things down that I can't preach on. Never preach on sin. I messed that one up. Never bring up hell. Oh, boy. Don't ever challenge people to discipleship. Oh, man, I'm messing this up big time. AI would go on to say that the way to build a mega church is to keep it user-friendly. I got to thinking about something. There may be some truth in that. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to keep preaching the same way I have been, and I'm going to still talk about hell, and going to preach on sin because sin's not your boss. And we are getting ready to start a discipleship class. Do you feel a little bit uncomfortable yet? Well, you might. I'm not so certain that that's the epitome of what we should be doing. Building the body up is not just, and by the way, let me just be fair, okay? It's also not an excuse not to grow or to be emphatic in your outreach. Do any and everything you can within reason. Doing all to the glory of God, whether you eat, whether you drink, or whether you sleep. So if we're careful, you realize that there's probably not a whole lot that I won't do. I haven't gotten up on top of the roof yet, though they tell me they're bringing out a 20-foot high lift to work on that roof. I might get up there and preach a sermon on Sunday morning at the steeple. I haven't done that yet. I haven't swallowed a goldfish yet. And I grew up in an era when I was a youth pastor when that was a big deal. Yeah, youth directors were doing stupid stuff, man. And I did my share of stupid. I call them wood, hay, and stubble. I once put my wife in a coffin. Did I ever tell you about that? I once put her in a coffin. And we made her up like this ghoul, right? And we had this haunted trail. Hey, they have Hell House now. I had a haunted trail. And way out in the woods, and we invited people and gave out tickets and all this stuff. And I had my wife in a coffin, in the ground. In the ground. And it was pitched slightly, right? And you'd walk by, and they'd give a signal, and out she would come. Yeah. I'm not so certain that made it to the glory of God. I'm not sure that we get, fine gold, precious metals, silver and gold. That might have fallen under wood, hay, and stubble, but boy, she jumped up out of that coffin, and the preacher was standing right there. And of course, he blew the whole thing. Well, Laura, what are you doing down there? Yeah, we've done a few things that maybe might be borderline. So don't let anybody deceive you with vain words or vanity because of the things that cometh the wrath of God upon children of disobedience. Payday's coming someday. And I thank God for the mercies of God and the long-suffering of God, and they ride in on our coattails right now. But Romans chapter 8 says that even this whole world has groanings which they can't even be uttered. It moans and it groans against the day when Jesus comes back again. This no king's protest, I don't get it. I don't get it. A good friend of mine, a real close friend to the Irwins, we fished together quite a bit. He wrote me a little note and he said, there is a king coming back. and he's ticked. And I thought to myself, at the second coming, yes, the king that comes back is going to be ticked, and this world's going to step aside. But not yet, not today. So I don't know, have your no kings protest all you want. Be ye not therefore partakers with them. Okay, that's plain enough, isn't it? You don't have to do what they do. You don't have to think like they think. You shouldn't be anyway. For ye were sometimes in darkness. And I give an illustration. You all heard it before. You don't want me to bore you with it, but I probably will anyway. But now you are the light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit in all goodness and righteousness and truth, proving what is acceptable unto the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them, for it's a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. There was a day when I never thought that some of the things that were done in secret would be brought to light, and that I would have an obligation to stand here and speak on those things, because they are things that should have been they should have never come out because they were of darkness. We used to have this old shed. I told you this before. It was down in South Texas, and all the farm implements and some of the tools and nails and screws and all that stuff was down there, and it was a spooky place. I mean, the old guy that built it, he took all the windows and it was all boarded up, and it was just this tin shack. We run one bulb in there, and you open this door, and you had to feel behind this door where the switch was. You don't chase darkness out, you just turn a light on. And when I would flip that switch, stuff would start scurrying around, bugs and spiders and snakes and rats, and I mean, you don't chase darkness out of a room, you just turn the light on. And cockroaches and all kinds of bad stuff, right? Well, that's really what Paul's telling them. He's saying you don't walk with the unfruitful works of darkness. You don't do that anymore. So what do you have to do in order to be wise? Prioritize. You have to prioritize. When they're little, when they're small, when they're growing up, I prioritize for them. That's my job. That's a parent's job. Now, I can get in trouble here, so I'll just keep moving on. You're waiting for me to get in trouble, aren't you? I'm going to just move on. This is children obey. You knew I wasn't going to let that lay, right? Children obey your parents in the Lord, not parents obey your children. Come on. Don't blame the architect. God had a perfect plan for marriage. He had a perfect plan for the home, the family. You can't rewrite that which God has already wrote, and He has spoken. And there's a world out there right now that's trying to rewrite everything and put another definition and another stamp of approval upon it. And if I'm reading this correctly, and I believe I am, you're not to really do what they do. I don't care what they did. My kids will come home like some of your kids, and they would throw out, well, everybody's doing it. And I got to thinking about that. And I said probably what you said. Well, everybody's not your father, not your mother. And you're not everybody. You're somebody. And you're my kid. And so, no. You're not going to get a choice. No. If my kids were in here this morning and you asked them about mom and dad, I'm pretty confident as to what they would say. They never had to worry about mom and dad doing things that are foolish or things that were in darkness. And I think that's great. Some of you experienced that same thing. That's something to be very proud of, very thankful for that. If you ask my kids what kind of a father was your dad, I'm going to tell you, they're going to say, I'm the life of the party. I like to have fun. You know, when I got saved, I got to thinking, I'm going to have to give up so many things. I didn't have to give up anything. Most of my friends that didn't want to have anything to do with Jesus just walked away from me anyway. I almost had to work at getting in trouble. Now, I found my share of trouble. And so what Paul's trying to say is if you're going to walk wisely in this world, you need to know who your daddy is, who your heavenly Father is. And you don't let them speak, talk, act unwisely, and make you do the things that they want to see you fall and fail in. Satan, he doesn't have any attachment to you. And so the next best thing is to get a Christian to fall. And he works pretty hard at that. I got to admit it. So for the fruit of the Spirit, in all goodness and righteousness and truth. We prove what is acceptable unto the Lord. We don't have fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. I'll say it one more time. We don't have fellowship. Give me a layman's definition of fellowship. I'm sure you all know it, right? Two fellows in the same ship. You don't have fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness. You just don't do it. Well, I want to win them. You know what I've always found to be true? And there's a ratio that I always work toward. I didn't always get that. But I believe that you ought to have some friends that are lost. I do. But never to the point where they begin to influence you. When you lose your influence with them and they bring more on to the party, it might be time for you to prioritize and walk away. Now, this is a very practical application for those teenagers, right? Prioritize now. Daniel, being a teenager, when he was tested, he already knew what he was going to say. He already knew what he would and would not do. Don't wait till it's right in front of you to figure it out. Most of the time we choose wrong, especially when we have peer pressure. Now, it's been a long time since I taught a youth class, so I did a little research, and I found out that the number one, and this is still true, the number one influence in your teenager's life are their friends. Sorry. If you're the exception to that rule, thank God for it. If mom and dad are still that exception, or a grandparent, then thank God for that influence. Because there are a lot of kids walking down the wrong path right now because their friends are doing it, and I'm going to tell you, everybody's not doing it. I can just see it right now. Satan comes up to Eve. I need you to eat this fruit. Everybody's doing it. There wasn't anybody else. Right? Just Adam. Don't listen to their vain words. Don't participate in those things that are dark. And I don't know that I have to have a list of that. But don't have fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. For it's a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. But all things are reproved and made manifest in the light, and whosoever doeth make manifest is light. Wherefore he saith, Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, Christ shall give you light. You want to know how to walk in the light? He's the light. Christ is the light. He always has been. And so as you walk with him, that's wisdom. You have to prioritize that. Now, here's where we get that. Verse number 15. See then that you walk circumspectly. That's upright. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but wise. You prioritize. That's the only way that that's going to happen. When you prioritize in your own life to walk in light, not darkness. There are things that you'll do, things that you won't do. And so you prioritize that. And that's right there in verse 15. Verse 16, redeeming the time because the days are evil. Things haven't gotten better. They've gotten worse. And I'm not a doomsdayist, and like I said, we can still have a great time. I have the most fun being around believers and my kids and my family. To this day, if my kids were here and you asked them, what was your favorite vacation? You know what they're going to tell you? Dog Patch, USA. When Dad hooked up a trailer to that old van and we went into Arkansas and Missouri and Indiana, and my dad did 9 stupid things. It got so bad they started counting them. 9 stupid things that Dad did. And you want me to tell you what those were, don't you? My wife will not let me. We had a blast. We have a great time together. We don't have to, I never did see the sense in it anyway, but we never go out and get so wasted that you can't even remember what you did. Redeem the time, that's the brevity part. You don't have as long as you think. So Psalm chapter 90, remember that? When you hit 70, you're to count your days, you're to number those days, you're to make those days count. As we get older, we start counting days, don't we? You're to make those days count. By that standard, you're not old. You might feel old, but you're not. Number 3, sovereignty. This one's going to take you back a little bit, so I'll try to get through this. Here we go. Wherefore, be ye not unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. You say, well, is that possible to be able to do that? Yes, it is. I'm going to read you a paradox. Now, normally, a paradox, there are 2 contradictory statements, one on one end of the bookcase and the other on the other end. And then you take everything in the middle and you investigate it, and it gives you a spiritual truth. I couldn't find any wiggle room on this one. I found that the truth was before and after, not in the middle. All right? Proverbs chapter 26. And bear with me just a few minutes because this is a definition of a fool. If we know what wise is, if we know what wisdom is, and to walk in that wisdom is to walk with Him as children of light, then well, what's the definition of a fool? Well, I think Psalm 14 verse 1 gives me the best definition of a fool. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. You want to know why they don't want a God? Because they don't want any morality. They want no justice. They don't want a God that will judge them. And before I was saved, I didn't either. I just liked to do what I wanted to do. I didn't want somebody to tell me it was wrong. And then when I recognized that I was lost, maybe God does, because He's sovereign. Maybe He does have a say in all of this. Well, here it is, Proverbs 26. As snow in summer. What? As snow in summer. Now that doesn't, unless you're in Montana, that usually doesn't happen. You know, they tell me there's winter and then there's August in Montana. And so unless you're in Montana or parts of Wyoming, it can happen, but it's never good when it does. There are exceptions, and that's when there's a drought, but let's not get into that. Don't mess with my illustration. And as rain in harvest, well, those don't go together. It's pretty hard to harvest a crop when it's raining. It'll rot the crop. So automatically, I'm set up against that. I'm like, what? So is honor seemingly for a fool. In other words, you're not going to give honor to a fool. So why do we do that? I don't know. Maybe you can answer that question, but the world wants to set up. They want to put people that are foolish as the elite. They do this in the sports world. They do this in Hollywood. They do this in all walks of life. They want to put and project these folks as being the elite. And God says they're not. You have to understand that. I have no personal grudge against anybody. I happen to know very few actors, and I appreciate their art, the art of acting. But to put them up as a spokesperson for the rest of the country is foolish. It's dumb. As the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying, we have some hummingbirds. Now, when we lived in South Texas, they have a hummingbird festival in Rockport. These birds, they fly 2,000 miles, not long after they've given birth. And they'll fly from the north all the way to Central America. And they stop over at a place in Rockport, and they have this hummingbird festival. And we used to hang out on our kitchenette window there. We would hang out a feeder. Well, we got the bright idea that we wanted to do that. So we hung one out, a month and a half ago or something like that. And we had these little guys coming, and they never rest. I don't remember how many beats per second their wings are, but to get one to sit still, it makes you a nervous wreck. You're like, just sit still for a minute. And they don't. Rarely will they sit still. In fact, we found one that wanted to run everybody else off. This one hummingbird said, "This is my feeder, it's got my name on it," and those people are sitting there watching me, so you got to leave. But we did that, and it lasted for about, 3 weeks, and now they're gone. You might have one at your house, but that's a rarity. They've already moved south. They're already flying south. They're a wandering bird. They never sit still. What does that have to do with foolishness and wisdom? Well, let's find out. As a swallow by flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. Does that mean anything to you at all? I read that and I'm like, what? What are you talking about, Lord? I'm confused. That's because it's not causeless. There's a cause, a principle. There's the sovereignty of God that is always in play. I don't fully understand that. There are some things I can't make sense out of, and I just believe them by faith. And people call that weakness. I call that wisdom. The world calls it foolish. God calls it wisdom. I don't have to fully understand everything there is to know about gravity to know that it's working on me right now. Yeah, I used to could jump. Now I'm like that old guy on that. And I noticed the torture machine is still up for grabs. We still got to sell that thing at a garage sale now, I get a kick out of that 82 or 89-year-old guy that clicks his heels and he gets about yay high up off the ground. That's twice as far as I can get off the ground. Yeah, so I don't understand it all, but I just believe it. And so this might come as a shock to you, but in days especially in which the Bible was written, there were those things that would happen, and people would trust so much in the sovereignty of God. I'm talking about lost people. They would cast lots. People that worshiped idols believed that there was a God that was so sovereign that they could cast lots and they would trust and believe in his sovereignty. Jonah got on a ship like that. In 2 Samuel chapter 16, there's a guy, and King David, he's already been made king. He's already fought Goliath and all that. Saul tried to kill him, and the house of Saul is pretty much completely in ruin. And there's a guy in 2 Samuel 16 that comes out as David and his procession comes by, and he starts to curse him. He says, you bloody man. Now, I don't know about you, but kings don't like to be cursed. It's usually not a good idea to do that. And this guy, he comes out and he's ranting and he's raving and he's cursing David. And Abishai, one of the generals says, let me go take his head. Now you go, well, what did he mean by that? He's going to take his head. He's going to take a sword out and he's going to go over there and he's going to knock this guy's head off. And David says, no, stop. Let him curse. Insomuch that God might hear it and recognize my affliction. You know what David was right in the middle of? An overthrow. You know who was overthrowing David? His son Absalom. Bad time in David's life. And David so believed in the sovereignty of God that for personal pride, he said, leave the guy alone. Let it go. How many of you ever been cussed at? Cursed at? Well, you need to get out more. I have it happen regularly to me. Yeah. Maybe I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't know. But there's a sovereign God. And David recognizes that, and he just simply says, look, leave the guy alone. If God might not perchance hear, like God doesn't hear, he's going to hear. And it's God that delivers, not this man. We need to remember that. Now, here's what might throw you, because it did me. A whip for the horse, a bridle for the ass, the donkey, and a rod for a fool's back. Well, Lauren, I know a little bit about a bridle. We know a little bit about, a whip. We don't call it that, but it's about 4 feet long, and it's got a whip on the end of it, and we use it to lunge the horses and that kind of thing. But a rod to a fool's back. Well, what does that mean? Well, here we're going to find out, okay? And I want you to look at me like I looked at this when I read it. Apparently, must have just passed it over, but I didn't pass it over this time. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like him. Verse 5. Answer a fool according to his folly. Wait a minute. Stop. I'm confused. 1 minute you tell me not to answer a fool according to his folly. And with no space between, now you tell me answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. Well, I found out that the last few chapters of Proverbs, Hezekiah put them together, and in the inspiration of God, God in his holiness put those two verses back to back. A great paradox. On the one hand, don't get caught up answering a fool in his folly, because when you do that, you are like as unto him. On the other hand, answer a fool according to his folly. And the reason, I think, is pretty plain, and it's that he's not wise in his own conceit. Now, here's where we need to get moving, and we'll try to hurry along and get this finished. Psalm 14, verse 1 says, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. Proverbs 12:15, I want you to pay attention because these verses have a real heart to them. Proverbs 12:15, the way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. Here's another one, Proverbs 20, verse 3. Proverbs 20, verse 3. I'm waiting on you, brother. Proverbs 20, verse 3. Did I give it to you? Maybe I didn't. Maybe I did. It is an honor for a man to cease from his strife, but every fool will be meddling. Just stop right there. There is a time and there is a place to answer a fool, lest he be wise in his own conceit, because fools consider their wisdom to be smarter than God's wisdom. There's a time to keep quiet, to say nothing at all. And it's not hard for me to prove that. Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, verses 20 through 22, it's the Sermon on the Mount, you understand that? And that there's something there that's at stake. Jesus says that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees and the scribes, you'll in no way enter heaven. And then he begins to talk about certain things. Remember that in the heart and in the mindset of the Pharisee and the scribe, they were traditionalists. They understood the Ten Commandments, that thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery. And so here's what they brought to the table. We didn't kill anybody. We must be right with God. We didn't commit adultery. We must be right with God. And so what Jesus does is he takes them to the nth degree. He says, well, what do you say in here? You've killed, you've murdered in your heart. You're in danger of the judgment. You've said, thou fool. You've looked at a brother and hated him. You've murdered in your heart. And so he's pressing the issue of the heart. So he's giving an answer to the Pharisee and the scribe in Matthew 16. You can look there for just a second. Probably ought to read that. Matthew 16 and verse 1. He answers. The Pharisees also and the Sadducees came, tempting, desired him that he would show a sign from heaven. Okay, he's Jesus. He's the Son of God. I'll give him that. I'm not. I have to rely on wisdom from above. I don't have it just supernaturally imputed to me, even though my eternal well-being has been imputed to me, and the righteousness of God is the smarts. I must have been absent that day in Bible college. Okay? It's work for me to do this. You don't have any idea how much work goes into this. I need a smarter man. So they wanted a sign. He answered them. Might have been easy just to have walked away and said, this is a fool's errand. I'm casting pearl before swine. They're never going to get it. But lest they be wise in their own eyes, let's talk about that for a minute. And he answers and he said, well, when it's evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky's red. This is before Channel 12, news and weather, okay? And in the morning, it'll be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. O ye hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky, but can ye not discern the sign of the times? A wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall be, or shall no sign be given unto it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. Hence, you have to go back and read what Jonas wrote. So there's a time to answer a fool. And there's also a time not to. And I'm going to close with this because I think I can probably get another week or two out of this one. So answer not or answer. Which is it? Well, to walk wisely, to walk in light, circumspectly, upright, is to have wisdom from above, not wisdom from below. Now, there are a few people that I listen to. I think I've already mentioned that before. I heard one of my favorite preachers say something yesterday that I said, Lord, did he say what I think he said? And so she came over and she said, well, he sure did. And I'm going to tell you what I did about that. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Because I know him better than that. We all make mistakes. And I'm going to say something that I hope you understand and you take it to heart. You've been told to not trust the vain words of just anybody. And when I get up here and I pray and you know what I think I've told you before what my main prayer is before I come to preach. It's, Linda, it's, God, don't let me mess this up. Really, don't let me mess this up. I'm a man. And by the way, and I said this, I don't know if I told you this, Caleb, or not, but when you were saved just like I was. You don't look down to anybody. The ground at the foot of the cross is level. We've all been saved the same way by grace through faith. And we may not all have the same office and the same function in the body, but you're no less. If you've been saved a week or a day or 50 years, you're no less in God's sight. And there's wisdom from above. So it'd be easy for me just to simply say, I'm going to take a rain check on this one and I'll get back to you next week. But I won't. I'll let you read on. And you'll understand that the paradox is given so that you would ask the question, should I or shouldn't I? Should I answer this fool? Now, once again, I have nobody in my mind, and I could probably put a generality upon that, but it's going to come down to whether you believe that in your mind and in your heart, you're supposed to answer a fool. There are some cults that I absolutely don't give them the time of day. And a lot of it's on a case-by-case basis. If I sense there is even a little bit of a desire to learn, to hear truth, I'll answer. But if I don't, I don't. Now, I'm going to say this prayerfully and with humility, Daniel, okay, with all the humility that I know how to. I've been at this over 50 years. I can pretty well tell when somebody is worth me spending time with them or not. And I hate to say it that way because I'm not any better than anybody else. But there are some people you're wasting your breath. Why do they do the same stupid thing over and over and over again? Well, you answer that. And then there are those that I'll bend over backwards to answer because I have this little ray of hope that the truth will set them free. And I'm not talking just about cults now. I'm talking about people of our own household. There's just this little bit of hope that they'll hear and that they'll truly believe, and it'll set their life in motion down a path of righteousness, not darkness. Because let me tell you, I think everybody has somebody that they know if they continue to walk down that path, it's not going to end well. Right? At what point do you say, no? Well, I can't answer that. I can't answer that for you. But let's close with an analogy. He that sends a message by the hand of a fool cutteth off his feet and drinketh damage. What? It's called a fool's errand. It's a foolish thing to give an errand to a fool. You might as well cut off your feet and get ready for punishment because it's coming. So there has to be a discernment. Let's just keep reading. The legs of the lame are not equal. So is a parable in the mouth of a fool. As he that bindeth a stone in a sling. Now, I can't find my old slingshot because if I could have, I would have brought it. But it's the idea of putting a stone or a ball bearing in a slingshot and then tying it up. It's of no value, of no use to you. Anybody, I wish Ethan were here today. Anybody ever use nunchucks? Those things are dangerous. Yeah. I practiced with rubber nunchucks. I'll tell you why, because I kept hitting myself in the head. Chris Farley had nothing over on me. You know, Beverly Hills Ninja, you know, all that stuff. Well, that's how foolish it would be to send a fool on an errand. It's like putting a stone or a ball bearing in a slingshot, and then you just bang your head with it because it ain't going nowhere. It's coming right back and hitting you in the head. Not real smart. As a thorn goeth up into the hand of a drunkard, so is a parable in the mouth of fools. That's twice now. He's given me an analogy. The great God that formed all things. You either believe that or you don't. Both rewardeth the fool and rewardeth transgressors. What? He rewards the fool and he pays the transgressor. Payday's coming someday. Might not be today, might not be tomorrow. But a fool will garnish a wage. Here's what you know about that. Last week, the wage of sin is what? death. But the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. And I'll close you with the most profound analogy. I'm going to gross you out. All right? How many of you have dogs? Cats? Okay. If I understand this correctly, a horse cannot throw up. Is that right? I'm not real sure, but I don't think they can. That's why they colic, because they can't throw that up. As a dog returneth to his vomit. That's real picturesque, isn't it? As a dog returns to his vomit, and we're getting ready to go have lunch here in just a minute. As a dog return, come on, Brother Mark, you said that once. As a dog returneth to his vomit, so a fool returns to his folly. I don't know what she's looking for, but that beagle, every once in a while, she'll throw up. And if we don't beat her to it, she's looking through there for something. I'm like, get a plate. It's one of those things with me. I don't do real well changing baby diapers. Have you changed a diaper yet, Caleb? We'll keep that between you and me, buddy. You're going to have a bigger mess on your hands, Mom, if you let me in there. Seest thou a man? Not limited to men now, by the way, but seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? There is more hope of a fool than of him. You have to have a spirit of discernment. I'll show you how to do that next week. Lord, I pray that you might watch over us, that you might give us wisdom from above. Help us not to be unkind or not tactful, but help us to be in our own wisdom. We know very little. But wisdom that's from above, Lord, it is like health and marrow to the bone. It restores people. It's healthy. It puts them on a different path. Give us discernment not to keep company of fools. And Lord, at the same time, help us to always realize we were fools. We were fools. We were foolish. And you saved us still. And so my prayer is that you might simply take that which you've given to us this morning. Help us to prioritize. Help us set priorities in our families, in our church. Lord, that will not only honor and glorify you, but will bring health and prosperity, wisdom and knowledge and strength to the constituents. I pray that we understand that there's just here but for a moment. We're here only for a short period of time. And Lord, help us to see your sovereignty in all things, especially those things that I just don't understand. Help us to make better sense out of this paradox with the time that you've given to us. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.